Can't wait till church tomorrow, and woke up Sunday with something totally different. Monday, I woke up excited, or Monday night I went home excited to finally vote, and Tuesday came and we voted, and then Wednesday we woke up to something different. Right? That is how life goes. You know, in life we know that when we are playing the game, there's always going to be winners and there's losers. And in an election, there's no difference. There are winners and losers. Now, it's an interesting time we are in the church year. Because we have two more Sundays today and next Sunday, and it's the year C, and then we begin in Advent all over again the last Sunday of this month. And it's amazing how the year just goes by so quickly. And so at this time of the year in the church cycle of readings, we hear of end time stories, right? And it's kind of weird, right? Considering the election we had and the readings for today, you were like, okay, Lord, is this the end time? But as I say, oftentimes, I said, what generation do you know that didn't have war? That didn't have nations rising against nations, brothers and sisters and rising up against each other? What age do we know that didn't have natural disasters? And we see that every generation, the end time is always near. And Jesus and Paul and all of the writings readers remind us that we are not to worry about when the end time comes. The end time did not come because Trump was elected president. All right? The end time didn't come. We all woke up the next day and the day after, and we're still waking up, right? So the end time is not for us to worry about. And so Paul says to us this morning at the end of the text, never weary of doing what is right. As we have contemplated, I'm sure many of us have, as to this whole election cycle, this grand finale that for some of us climaxed at a low and for others at a high. There's still one question that remains for all of us. What now? What next? It seems that we have opened up so much ugliness, bitterness, separatistness in the world that we live in, that the look of hope seems to be distant for so many. People fear whether or not they're going to be deported. People fear whether or not they're going to get beat up on the street, arrested for no reason. People fear for their lives in this country. And the world is certainly looking at us, wondering what just happened. So where do we go from here? But the message is simple from Paul this morning, who says, never weary for doing what is right. The people who are living in fear, our brothers and sisters who need to be supported and cared for, still need us to be there for them. The lost that feels that the election wasn't for them needs for us to come out and reach out for them to bring them back into the fold and say, you are not standing alone. We are here for you. The voices that spoke up loudly and said our voices are finally heard need to be heard as well, to say, okay, you say we haven't been listening to you. Tell me, what is it that you need? The election of Trump did not create the problem we are having today. Let's be perfectly clear. This problem of race relations, this problem of gender issue, this problem of religious right and wrongs, this problem of sexuality has been brewing in this country for generations. Amen. Trump and Clinton, or Hillary, just took advantage of the system. And now it's come to a head. And we wonder, have we shown each other such ugly sides of each other that we cannot see the love of God and our brothers and sisters? Of course, for me, the answer is no. Because we can always see and find goodness in everyone around us. It may be difficult. It may be challenging. You may want to revert back. But that's not what we're being called to do. We can no longer go back to the way we were. Because we have to talk about some things in this country. We have to speak to the hurts that have come out. We have to start really having real conversations about race relations in this country. Amen. And that begins not out there, but right here. It begins the conversation in our homes, with our children, with our spouses, with our family, and branches out from there into our churches. This weekend we had a convention for the Diocese of Long Island. And we had our convention, and the agenda was planned way before the elections happened. And one of the things that Bishop Provenzano wanted us to focus on, and something that the National Church has been focusing on, is the sin of racism and reconciliation. And so he wanted to focus on reconciliation in our convention, and he dedicated Friday, the usually a part of business day, it was usually a business day, to do all the work of the church, because that's why we do go to convention. But he suspended those rules to say it is more important for us to deal with the issue of race in our diocese than to deal with the business of everyday business as usual. And so we stopped to have that difficult conversation. The makeup of our diocese, and we are considered the most diverse diocese in the Episcopal Church. There's over 7 languages spoken in our diocese. You can probably find most cultures represented in our churches in this diocese. From Caribbean, as we know, to European, African, to Asian, to whatever else I can't remember right now. They're all represented here. And to ignore the issues of race as if it doesn't matter in our diocese would to create more of the sin, just to perpetuate the sin of racism. And so we sat on Friday in the midst of the difficult election, and we had the difficult conversation with one another. And the bishop had commissioned a group of people to spend the year. So that's why I was saying that no matter what was happening in this election, this was in process. And they had a committee of people who spent a year looking and talking about how race has impacted our diocese, has impacted them as individuals. And one man got up from the committee and spoke, and he was a white, retired man from Suffolk County. Now, we know how Suffolk County voted, right? But he got up, and he was brave enough to come to convention and say, I am a retired cop, and as I looked at the news of all that was going on in Ferguson and the various places in the United States over the year, and I heard the terms Black Lives Matter, and I heard the rhetoric, when they were having one of the protests and they were yelling, what do we want? Cops dead. I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand. And in his desire to seek understanding, he went out and he asked his pastor, please, someone help me understand the anger that is going on in these marches, because I can't understand why people are asking or wanting cops to die. And he didn't, so he went out his normal confines and safety of his community to seek understanding in other community, which landed him on the commission. And he was there, and he shared his story, and others shared their stories of what happened to them in their lives. And one of the women talked about, one of the women on the panel talked about the relation, as I'm thinking about her sons growing up in the city and what that means to have black boys for her, and the fear that walks with her about her children and their safety. And so we proceeded to have table discussions, and then around our table, at first, people didn't want to speak. Right? At my table. I don't know what happened at other people's table, but a lot of people were just looking at each other. What do we do? And it's a good thing they told us to write down how race impacted you, because many people went straight to the paper. But in the tables that we were sitting, we didn't know, well, the goal was so that we didn't know people on our table, but me being who I am, I knew a lot of people on my table. And so the goal was to try to have diverse from race to gender to age, because our young people were sitting right there at the table with us. Sometimes we as adults like to have difficult conversations and tell the children go out the room as if this doesn't impact them, and that they don't have something to tell us, to teach us, and to speak about this issue. So where we were, and in my table, people spoke up and talked about their sons, like mothers talked about having sons who are black and what it meant for them. And one mother said, my sons were playing in our yard in Brooklyn outside, and I happen to know who she is and where she lives, and it's a nice neighborhood in Brooklyn. And they were playing outside in their own yards, and cops would constantly stop them and tell them, what are you doing in this yard? You don't live here. And them having to say, this is our house. You see, if we don't think that racism affects us, we are living in our own bubbled world. Whether you are black or white or Hispanic or Asian or whatever, how you identify, if you don't think these issues impact you, you are lying to yourselves, and you need to stop. Amen. I do this work for the diocese as an anti-racism trainer around, and so I go from Brooklyn all the way out to Montauk to talk to people about race awareness, and it never fails that someone, no matter what their skin tone, will come up in the group and say, race isn't an issue for me. I don't see color. And I don't understand. What do you mean? How do you not see color? I see color even amongst the white people. They're not all the same. And so how can you ignore the topic? You ignore it because it's just too difficult. You ignore it because it's painful. Because you have experienced what it means to be black, what it means to be white, what it means to be Asian, and the new term now, what it means to be mixed. In between nowhere. These things matter, and they bubble to a surface in our election. And we are concerned because we have elected someone who has taken these concerns and these fears and brought it to a new height, a new level, who has spoken such nasty and horrible things against the other that you wonder. And people style their fear has become reality to them. One lady, our facilitator, she's Italian, and she was sharing with us her story, and she said, I live in Queens Village, and I live on a very diverse block in Queens Village. And I have people from all over. I have some Caribbeans. I forgot the other one she mentioned, and me, the Italian. And she started sharing about the fact that her daughter's best friend on the block is this young, the same age, they're 6. So this young black boy, and they go in and out of each other's homes, and my child does not see color at this age, because children don't. They really don't see color. And so for her, she likes to say, we're like the United Nations. And we have some similarities, and we recognize them. But as she was sharing her story, she started to say, so her the parents of this boy is from, I think, Jamaica. I think that's what she said. And I forgot where the mother is from Colombia. And so they were having a conversation, and they noticed that a new couple moved in across the street from them. And so they all assumed, they said, oh, this Middle Eastern couple that just moved across the street, and they didn't go and greet them or say anything. But at one point in the middle of the night, they heard loud noises. And so they opened their windows and saw that the Middle Eastern couple was bringing blue barrels down. Right? And so they called each other. Do you see what's going on across the street? Wonder what it is. And they came to the conclusion they must be doing some type of a liquid bomb stuff going on. And so they started having this conversation of real concern. And they went back and forth, and they were like, what do we do? And the couple said, well, your brother-in-law, they told this to the Italian lady, your brother-in-law is a cop. Why don't you go and ask him and tell him what's going on? And so she called the brother-in-law. And the brother-in-law said, you're crazy, all of you. But he said, if you are concerned, if you are really concerned, here's the number, call this number. And so they did. They did. And then maybe a few weeks later, they saw the neighbor across the street who lived to the Middle Eastern couple who was bringing the barrels down in the middle of the night. They went and they asked her, what's up with these barrels? Aren't you concerned? And she said, oh no, I help them move the barrels all the time. And they were like, are you crazy? Or what's going on? Are you helping with these terrorists? And the woman looked at her and said, the barrels are filled with coats that they're sending back to their country in Guyana. She didn't know that, in Caribbean we have Middle Eastern, or Indian or Native people in the country. And she felt embarrassed, and all of them felt embarrassed, and they started pointing fingers at each other. And finally she said, no, wait a minute. Why are you pointing the finger at me for calling? You're the one that instructed me. Are you any better than me? We both made the assumptions. You see, if they had started with asking the question first, instead of jumping to conclusions of their own assumptions of what the other was thinking, this might have turned out different for them. Paul reminds us that we shall never tarry with doing what is right. And what is right is for us to reach across the aisle, as they like to say, to talk to the other. Why are there differences? Speak to the hurts. And so when we were around the table and listening, people had difficulty, but eventually we started talking and sharing our relations, sharing what it means to be a person of color, or sharing what it means to be perceived as the dominant race or the majority, and what it does to them. And we began to realize that we are connected. Because at the end of the day, no one can tell me in this country that people don't want to live in homes and houses and shelter, right? That people don't want jobs that they need that will pay for their bills and put food on the table. Whether you're black, white, Native American, whatever you call yourselves, you want these basic rights as human beings, is it not? Yes. And you love your family, even though they get on your nerves. We all want the same things. And so instead of looking at our differences, instead of walking in fear and trepidation, we need to begin to open up and have the difficult conversation that will bring about the peace of God in this place. That in having the conversation, we may go weary because we're tired of hearing the same rhetoric. But we will never stop until this is all put away. And let me just say about our young people, we need to have the conversation because we can't say let the next generation deal with it. Right? We want the generation to have something positive to look forward to. There was a lady in the convention. She got up, and as we were going over the budget for the convention, she said, I noticed that there's nothing in here for seniors. Right? There's nothing in your budget for seniors. And this is Pat, and Pat does this every year because every year she wants to highlight that we as Episcopalians are getting older and we need to be in the budget too. And she said, maybe you could call it the end of life program. And she making fun of herself. And she said, oh, I don't think it sounds too wonderful, but the point I'm making is that I may be old, but I have something to give. And that I would be willing and more than able to be mentoring people and young people about the ways of life. And I say this to say that don't think that you're too old. Don't think that your age, you've been there, done that, and you don't want to do it no more. As long as you have breath in this life, what do I always say? God has something for you to do. And you need to speak. And you need to teach and help the younger generation understand why we had an election like this. What is the history behind this? The anger and the frustration behind it. We need to let them know why it is that the race relations, why your friend who is a different color is treated differently than you, even in school with your teachers. Our facilitator also shared one more story. She said her daughter came home Wednesday after the election crying because she was afraid for her friend who happened to be African American. She was afraid that people were going to harm her and beat her or kill her or deport her because she didn't understand. All she heard was, well, now that Trump is elected, all this is left for the open. If you think these things don't impact our children, you are sadly mistaken. And she said, I don't know how to begin to have the conversation because really and truly she doesn't see color at this age. She can't understand. She just sees this person as her friend. And we said to her at the table, my friend, the conversation has already begun because she's asking you. Why the difference? The only thing you can do is share your values with her and how you relate to other people and other cultures and other races. Where do we go from here? Paul tells us, never tarry, never weary in doing what is right. There's a lot to do in the next few years of talking, of speaking, of sharing the pains of racism and how it has impacted you, your family, your neighborhood, everywhere. People need to understand that some of us have to leave our neighborhood just to go grocery shopping so we can get some decent food. They need to understand that we get your leftovers in our community. The second, they need to understand that some of us leave our community to bring our children into a better community where they can get education because we can't afford it or it's not offered to us in our neighborhood. People need to understand these things because as far as they're concerned, the world is good. They never had to have the conversation with their children and say, now listen, when you leave here, remember the manners we taught you. Remember, if you get pulled over by the cops, say nothing, do nothing, and if they arrest you, don't fight them. Just go and wait for your phone call, speak, don't say nothing. Most of them haven't had that conversation with their children. Most of the mothers there worry about their children. And I mentioned this. I said all of the my Caucasian counterparts, they worry about their children, just like my parents worry about me. But they don't have the added burden of wondering whether or not their child, who is a perfect child, who has not gotten into trouble, is going to get pulled over, shot, and killed, or thought to be a criminal, or whatever it is. And I often share one thing that I never forgot when my father used to walk me to school in Hempstead, going past Hempstead High to the private school I was going to. How many times when he left me, he would get stopped by the police asking him, what are you doing? And all he was doing was walking home in his own neighborhood. People need to understand where the anger comes from, or the hurt and the frustration comes from. But if all we're doing is yelling and not stopping to share and to talk and to hear both sides, we will not break this cycle. We need to reach out to the other side. We need to reassure our brothers and sisters who are living in fear that you stand and we stand in solidarity with you, and that we are willing to go to the other side and talk until there is no two sides of the aisle. But we are one as a people, one as a nation, truly. We might never see 100% eye to eye. That's just that we're talking heaven at that point, right? But we certainly can work towards seeing God in everyone in whom we encounter. This election, we can look at it as doomsday, or we can look at it as an opportunity to start over. We can look at it as an opportunity to tell the leaders of our country we will go no further than here in our divide. But we are ready to mend and to bring together this country. I'll say one more thought. I asked the question, who's to blame for where we are today? Right? Because I remember the very next day, or the very same day, the results were coming in, and all of a sudden, the Hillary, who was the great person that was going to win Trump, all of a sudden the news reporter said, "Oh, blame the Democrats for selecting the only person who will be able to lose to Donald Trump." Right? We want to blame game. The only people we have to blame are ourselves for creating the condition in which we live in. And I say that because how many people really pay attention? We paid attention to the national election, but how many people paid attention to the local one? How many of you just went in and saw all these names and said, well, I vote Republican usually, so I'm going to just go straight across the board. Or I vote Democrat usually, and I don't know these people, but I'm just going to go straight across the board. How many of you really knew the people that are running in your local community? Know what they stand for, how what they did, those who have already been in office, what they have done thus far for your community. Because we don't all live in the same communities. We don't all live in the same districts. And I remember for me, I said, Mom, I'm not voting for this person. And she looked and she said, oh, me neither. And I said, why are you not voting for her? Oh, I don't like that person. Yada, yada, yada. Why are you not voting for her? I know that anytime I ask them issues, they don't never know the issues of their area. So I didn't vote for them. But I tell you what, 4 years ago, I couldn't have that conversation. 4 years ago, I was the person that just went straight across the board. And I elected that person. We have to be concerned from the bottom all the way to the top. Our elected officials work for us. We don't work for them. And we need to begin to hold them accountable, because it is there that we begin to see the changes that have great impact on our lives. And after that, we go to the national level. I was making fun of Chuck Schumer. I like Chuck Schumer, so this is not a knockdown. But I didn't even know the man was running until a week before the elections. I was bombarded with commercials, right? And I was like, is he running? Is he up? What's going on? And even worse, I didn't even know there was a Republican running against him because we took it for granted, right? And he took it for granted. And I know a politician in Nassau County, our legislator, Tom Swazi, when he was rerunning for election, he took for granted that people liked him and people knew his name, and he lost. Mm-hmm. And then we got our Ed Mangano. Right? Our politicians are taking us for granted, and we are taking our politicians for granted. Get to know them. Hold them accountable for doing what is right. Be a thorn in their side and say, I'm not voting for you and this is the reasons why. Articulate it to them. Clergy, we often make fun that we says there's always, and no matter what church we're in and that we go to, there's always one or two members of the church that are a thorn in our sides, holding us accountable to the fire of whatever it is they want done in their church. And that same thorn is what I'm asking all of us to do for those we have put into leadership. Hold them accountable to their actions. Don't let them just say, oh, come in one day, hi, I'm so-and-so, remember I ran for you, here's a little few dollars, and keep it moving. Hold them down and say, no, it don't work like that in here. I want to know, what are you doing for my neighborhood? What are you doing? I tell you, I have gone to the police commission in the town of Hempstead and said, look, what are you doing about the house next door to me? Right? And we were a thorn in their side until we got that house and everybody in it evicted because it was just a drug house. And we go downtown. What are you doing about our sewer? It stinks. And we vote with at least in my family, we vote based on people who will listen to us and get things done. It doesn't mean that we're always right because it's not about just me, right? It's about the collective whole. But until you get to know people on that level, don't blame them out there. Ask yourself, what have you done to contribute to the problem? And what will you do to mend and aid in the healing and reconciliation of the problem? Do not tarry in doing what is right. Do not become frustrated and complacent and lose hope because your candidate or didn't win or because your candidate did win. I don't know. I don't make assumptions. The work is for us to do. And we will never labor in vain as long as God is with us and on our side. And the one last thing I'm going to say, as much as we want to say about win and lose and what may or may not happen, God is in control. Amen.